Alice sits on a riverbank, exhausted by a book containing no pictures or conversations. She exists as a proxy for the Victorian child, subjected to a society of strict etiquette, perfect posture, and endless lessons to learn by rote. This era prioritized objective facts and demanded absolute obedience to adult authority. Children were meant to be seen, not heard, and certainly not to question the established order of the world around them. Then a white rabbit with a pocket watch hurries past. Alice follows it into a hedge and finds herself falling down a very deep well. In an instant, she loses gravity, familiar geography, and total control. She is descending into an environment actively hostile to everything she has been taught. Wonderland operates as a meticulously designed ecosystem, built specifically to dismantle every tool we rely on to make sense of reality. For a mind trained to depend on strict societal rules, surviving down here requires a terrifying process. Alice must actively unlearn how the physical and logical world works. Desperate to ground herself after her fall, Alice reaches for the only coping mechanism she has, reciting her standard educational facts. She discovers that her new environment has corrupted mathematical and geographical logic. She attempts her times tables, declaring that 4 times 5 is 12. She tries geography, stating that London is the capital of Paris. The expected answers refuse to materialize. Even her memorized poetry betrays her, morphing into a sinister verse about a crocodile with gently smiling jaws. The creator behind this calculated chaos is Charles Dodgson, writing under the pen name Lewis Carroll. As an Oxford logician and mathematician, he is executing a very deliberate subversion of his own exact fields of study. He subjects Alice to sudden, uncontrollable physical changes. She shrinks to 10 inches, then shoots up to 9 feet, telescoping rapidly, losing control. This lack of physical consistency directly mirrors her loss of intellectual control. When objective facts become fluid, a person's trust in their own mind deteriorates. Alice is left weeping in a literal pool of her own tears, entirely unsure of exactly who she is anymore. As Alice wanders further, she encounters adult authority figures, the languid caterpillar, the frantic Mad Hatter. With them, the basic system of communication entirely breaks down. These residents demand absolute linguistic precision, scolding Alice for her choice of words, yet they communicate almost exclusively in paradoxes. They weaponize semantics, turning conversation into a rhetorical trap. The Mad Hatter presents the ultimate example. Why is a raven like a writing desk? Alice searches for the logic, expecting a clever punchline. Eventually, the Hatter admits he hasn't the slightest idea. The question is structured to demand logic, but engineered to have no answer. The Boer Mouse tells a story about 3 sisters living at the bottom of a treacle well, learning to draw things that begin with an M, like muchness. This literalized absurdity isolates Alice, repeatedly invalidating her understanding of reality. Language is supposed to build bridges of understanding. In Wonderland, it serves as an instrument of power, wielded by the natives to confuse and maintain absolute dominance over the uninitiated. This systemic failure reaches its peak on the Queen of Hearts croquet ground. In the Victorian world, a parlor game like croquet operates on strict turn-taking and defined boundaries. It represents civilized order, where participants agree to a shared set of rules. Wonderland destroys that order. The balls are live hedgehogs that unroll and crawl away. The mallets are live flamingos. Just as Alice prepares to strike, her mallet twists its neck to look up at her in confusion. The players play all at once, fighting and quarreling, constantly changing the rules without warning. The sporting equipment itself possesses an entirely unpredictable agency. Presiding over this chaos is the Queen of Hearts. She acts as an irrational absolute power, sentencing players to execution for missing turns. She issues rulings based entirely on volatile, furious emotion, rather than any requirement for evidence. When the highest arbiter of justice operates on pure whim, demanding sentences before verdicts, the law becomes an extension of personal temper. Alice realizes that in this garden, the very idea of a fair trial has been replaced by the threat of the axe. Alice watches the three pillars of her reality: objective fact, functional language, and rational justice buckle and snap. Her core frustration throughout the story stems from a singular conflict. She insists on applying a rigid, learned framework to a world that outright refuses to play along. Carol designed Wonderland as a direct satirical mirror held up to the arbitrary nature of our own world. We blindly trust the rules of our own environment. We accept polite etiquette, legal systems, and cultural idioms because we are taught to memorize them, rarely stopping to ask if they make actual objective sense. Wonderland's enduring legacy is its invitation to question the absolute authority of the sense we take for granted every single day.